The Arizona sun blazed overhead as 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez carefully arranged colorful autumn leaves into what she called her fairy house in her grandmother's backyard. Her chubby little fingers, still clumsy with concentration, placed each golden and crimson leaf with a serious dedication only a toddler could muster. She hummed a nonsensical tune her mother had taught her, completely absorbed in her magical creation beneath the old mesquite tree. "Emma needs more leaves for the fairy kitchen," she announced to herself in third person, the way young children often do. Her grandmother, Rosa, smiled from the kitchen window as she prepared lunch. Watching her precious granddaughter's imagination bloom in the desert garden they had lovingly tended together. The Rodriguez home sat on Maple Street, a quiet residential neighborhood in suburban Phoenix, where children rode bicycles on sidewalks and neighbors still waved to each other from front porches. Emma's family had lived here for 2 generations, and she knew every crack in the sidewalk, every friendly dog behind every fence. The house next door belonged to Mr. Thompson, a gentle 72-year-old widower who always had a smile and a wave for little Emma. He grew the most beautiful roses in his front yard and often gave Rosa clippings to brighten their own garden. Emma was reaching for a particularly perfect orange leaf when she heard voices from next door, angry voices that made her stomach feel funny. She had never heard Mr. Thompson sound upset before. Through the chain-link fence that separated the properties, she could see 2 tall men standing at Mr. Thompson's back door. They wore dark clothes and scary masks that covered their faces, making them look like the monsters from her bedtime stories. "Please, I already gave you everything," Mr. Thompson's trembling voice carried across the yard. "I don't have any more money." Emma dropped her leaves, her 3-year-old instincts telling her something was terribly wrong. She had been taught about stranger danger, about people who might want to hurt others. These men with their hidden faces and mean voices were definitely strangers, and they were definitely dangerous. The sound of breaking glass made Emma jump backward. Through the fence, she watched in horror as one of the masked men shoved Mr. Thompson hard. The kind old man stumbled and fell, his head hitting the concrete patio with a sickening thud that would haunt Emma's dreams for months to come. "Stupid old man," one of the intruders snarled. "Should have cooperated from the beginning." Emma's heart hammered against her tiny rib cage as she watched the men ransack Mr. Thompson's house. They threw furniture around, emptied drawers onto the floor, and stuffed items into black bags. Mr. Thompson lay very still on his patio, and Emma somehow knew with the terrible clarity that children sometimes possess that he wasn't sleeping. He was hurt in a way that couldn't be fixed with band-aids and kisses. Terror paralyzed her small body. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to call for Grandma Rosa, to scream for help. But her feet felt glued to the ground, and her voice seemed to have disappeared completely. She clutched her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hopper's, against her chest and squeezed her eyes shut, hoping that when she opened them, the nightmare would be over. When she finally dared to look again, the bad men were loading their stolen treasures into a dark van parked in Mr. Thompson's driveway. They moved quickly, efficiently, like they had done this terrible thing before. Emma pressed herself against the garden shed, making herself as small as possible behind the old wooden structure that smelled of fertilizer and garden tools. "Let's go," she heard one of them say. Someone might have heard the old man yelling. The van doors slammed shut with a sound like thunder, and the vehicle roared to life. Emma watched through a gap in the shed boards as it disappeared down Maple Street, carrying the monsters away from her safe neighborhood forever, or so she hoped. But Mr. Thompson still wasn't moving. Emma stayed hidden behind the shed for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. She couldn't make herself move, couldn't make herself speak, couldn't do anything but stare at the terrible scene next door and hold Mr. Hopper so tight that his stuffing nearly burst through his worn seams. The sound of sirens finally broke. Through her paralysis, red and blue lights flashed against the houses as police cars and ambulances filled the street. Neighbors emerged from their homes, pointing and whispering. Emma's grandmother appeared in the backyard, calling her name with increasing panic. "Emma! Emma! Where are you, Mia?" But Emma couldn't answer. The words were trapped somewhere deep. Inside her chest, tangled up with the image of Mr. Thompson falling, with the sound of breaking glass, with the scary masks that had hidden the faces of evil. When Rosa finally found her granddaughter crouched behind the garden shed, Emma was staring straight ahead with eyes that had seen too much. Her stuffed rabbit was damp with tears she didn't remember crying, and her fairy house lay scattered and forgotten, its magic destroyed by the reality of violence. "Emma, baby, what happened? Did you see anything?" Rosa asked gently, gathering the little girl into her arms. But Emma couldn't speak. The trauma had stolen her voice as surely as the masked men had stolen Mr. Thompson's life. She pressed her face against her grandmother's shoulder and remained silent, holding the terrible secret locked away in her 3-year-old heart, unaware that her silence would become the biggest obstacle between justice and the monsters who had shattered her innocent world. The police had arrived, but their only witness had been rendered mute by the very crime she had witnessed. Emma Rodriguez had become the keeper of a truth too heavy for such small shoulders to bear, and finding a way to unlock that truth would require a miracle or perhaps just the right 4-legged friend to help her find her voice again. Detective Maria Santos stepped out of her unmarked police cruiser at 4:17 p.m., the Phoenix heat still radiating from the asphalt despite the approaching evening. At 34, she had worked countless crime scenes, but something about this one felt different, heavier somehow. The radio chatter had mentioned a child witness, and those cases always hit her hardest. She opened the rear door of her vehicle and watched as her partner emerged with practiced grace. Rex was a 4-year-old German Shepherd whose reputation preceded him throughout the Phoenix Police Department. His thick black and tan coat gleamed in the afternoon sun, and his alert brown eyes surveyed the scene with an intelligence that never ceased to amaze Maria. At 75 pounds of muscle and instinct, Rex had been trained at the prestigious Canine Academy in Colorado, specializing in evidence detection, tracking, and victim assistance. His badge, polished and proud, hung from his official harness, alongside commendations from 3 successful cases this year alone. "All right, boy," Maria murmured, clipping Rex's working leash to his collar. "Let's see what we're dealing with here." The crime scene was a study in controlled chaos. Yellow tape fluttered in the desert breeze, creating boundaries around Mr. Thompson's modest ranch-style home. Forensic technicians moved methodically through the house, photographing overturned furniture and collecting evidence. The coroner's van waited ominously in the driveway, and Maria's heart sank as she realized they were dealing with a homicide. Sergeant Davis approached with his usual grim expression. "Victim is Harold Thompson, 72, retired postal worker. Neighbors found him after they heard the sirens. Looks like a home invasion gone wrong. Blunt force trauma to the head, probably died on impact." Maria nodded, her pen moving across her notepad. "Suspects?" "That's where it gets interesting," Davis said, glancing toward the house next door. "We've got a witness, Emma Rodriguez, 3 years old. Grandmother says the kids saw everything from their backyard, but she hasn't spoken a word since we arrived. Child's usually a chatterbox according to the family, but trauma's got her tongue-tied." Through the chain-link fence, Maria could see a small figure sitting on the back porch steps of the Rodriguez home. Emma was tiny even for her age, with dark curly hair that caught the sunlight and huge blue eyes that seemed too old for her cherubic face. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit and stared blankly at the ground, her whole body radiating the kind of stillness that comes from shock. "Has anyone tried talking to her?" Maria asked. Child Services sent someone over, and the families got their pediatrician coming. But the kids locked up tight. Grandmother says she was playing right here when it happened, had a perfect view of the whole thing. Rex had been patiently sitting at Maria's side, but now his ears perked up. He was looking directly at Emma, his head tilted in that curious way dogs have when they sense something humans miss. Maria noticed his interest immediately. "Mind if we approach?" she asked Davis. "Worth a try. Family's cooperative. They want whoever did this caught." Maria and Rex walked to the fence line, where Emma's grandmother, Rosa Rodriguez, stood wringing her hands. Rosa was a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and worry lines etched deep around her kind eyes. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Detective Santos. This is my partner, Rex. Would it be okay if we spoke with Emma?" Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "She hasn't said a word, Detective. Not one word. This morning she was singing in the shower, making up silly songs about her toys. Now, ... Now she's like a little ghost." Maria crouched down by the fence, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. Rex sat beside her, his professional demeanor softening as he sensed the child's distress. "Hello, Emma. I'm Maria, and this is Rex. He's a police dog, which means he helps people feel safe." Emma's gaze flickered upward for just a moment, landing on Rex. The dog remained perfectly still, his brown eyes gentle and patient. Something passed between them, a connection that transcended words. Emma's grip on her stuffed rabbit loosened slightly. "Rex is very good at his job," Maria continued softly. "He can smell things that help us find bad people and keep good people safe. Would you like to meet him?" Rosa opened the gate, and Maria entered the Rodriguez backyard with Rex at her side. The dog moved slowly, instinctively understanding that this small human needed careful handling. He approached Emma with the same deliberate gentleness he used with all trauma victims, stopping just outside her personal space and sitting down. Emma studied Rex with those two wise eyes. She reached out tentatively, then pulled her hand back. Rex didn't move, didn't push, just waited with the infinite patience that made him exceptional at his job. After several minutes, Emma extended one small finger and barely touched Rex's nose. The dog's tail gave the slightest wag, not exuberant, just acknowledging. "He's beautiful, isn't he, Mia?" Rosa whispered, sitting down on the porch step beside her granddaughter. Emma nodded almost imperceptibly. It was the first response she had given anyone since the incident. Maria felt a surge of hope. She had seen Rex work magic before, but never with someone so young, so traumatized. "Emma, did you see what happened to Mr. Townsend today?" The little girl's body tensed, and she buried her face against Rose's shoulder. But her eyes remained fixed on Rex, who seemed to understand her fear better than any human could. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the child psychologist who arrived shortly after, explained what they were witnessing. Children Emma's age often develop selective mutism after trauma. Her mind is protecting her from having to verbalize what she experienced. But see how she's responding to the dog. Animals can sometimes reach parts of the psyche that humans can't access. Over the next hour, Emma slowly warmed to Rex's presence. She didn't speak, but she began drawing pictures. Crude 3-year-old sketches that showed stick figures with dark faces and a large dog standing between them and a smaller figure that could only be herself. As the sun set over Maple Street, Maria made a decision that would change everything. "Mrs. Rodriguez, would it be okay if Rex and I visited Emma again tomorrow?" "I think they're forming a special bond." Rosa nodded eagerly. "Anything that might help her heal." As they prepared to leave, Emma suddenly stood up. She walked over to Rex and whispered something so quietly that only the dog could hear. Rex's ears pricked forward and his tail wagged once. Whatever she had said, it was meant only for him. Maria looked at her four-legged partner with new respect. Rex wasn't just a police dog anymore. He was becoming Emma's lifeline back to a world where words existed and justice was possible. But the road ahead would require patience, trust, and the kind of healing that only happens one whispered secret at a time. Tuesday became the most important day of the week in the Rodriguez household. For 3 weeks now, Detective Santos and Rex had made their regular visits, each one revealing another small piece of Emma's healing puzzle. Rosa had started baking extra sugar cookies on Monday nights, knowing that her granddaughter would spend Tuesday morning arranging them in careful patterns on a paper plate, 1 for Detective Santos, 2 for herself, and always 3 for Rex. Emma's routine had become a sacred ritual. She would wake up earlier than usual on Tuesdays, brushing her dark curls with extra care and selecting her favorite dress, the yellow one with tiny sunflowers that her mother had bought her for Easter. She would sit by the living room window, Mr. Hoppers clutched in her arms, watching for the familiar police cruiser to turn onto Maple Street. "She knows exactly what time you'll arrive," Rosa explained to Maria during their third visit. Yesterday, she stood by that window for 2 hours, just waiting. She won't eat breakfast until she sees Rex get out of your car. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like watching a flower bloom in slow motion. During their first visit, Emma had only touched Rex's nose with one trembling finger. By the second visit, she was brave enough to pet his soft ears. Now, 3 weeks later, she would run to the fence gate the moment she spotted the police car, her face lighting up with the first genuine smile her family had seen since Mr. Thompson's murder. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had explained the psychology behind Emma's attachment to Rex. Dogs don't judge, don't ask difficult questions, and don't expect her to be anything other than exactly what she is in this moment, she told Maria and Rosa during a consultation. Rex represents safety without pressure. He's become her emotional bridge back to trust. The breakthrough moments came in whispers and crumbs. Emma began leaving pieces of her cookies around the backyard, not randomly, but in deliberate patterns that only made sense to her 3-year-old logic. When Maria asked about them, Rosa shrugged helplessly. "She says they're for Rex's friends. I think she means birds or maybe lizards, but she insists Rex told her to do it." During their 4th visit, something remarkable happened. Emma approached Rex with a child's picture book, the little engine that could, and settled beside him on the grass. She opened the book and began reading to him, making up words to go with the pictures since she couldn't actually read yet. Her voice was so quiet that Maria had to strain to hear, but the important thing was that Emma was using her voice at all. "Rex, this is about a train," Emma whispered, pointing to the colorful illustrations. "The train is scared, just like me. But then it gets brave. Do you think I can get brave too?" Rex lay perfectly still, his intelligent eyes following Emma's tiny finger as she traced the pictures. His tail would give an occasional gentle thump against the ground, as if he were actually listening to her story. And perhaps, in his own way, he was. By the 5th week, Emma had begun having conversations with Rex that lasted for entire visits. She would curl up against his warm side and tell him secrets that she wouldn't share with anyone else, not even Rosa, not even her parents, who visited every evening with tears in their eyes and hope in their hearts. "I saw the bad men hurt Mr. Thompson," she whispered during one particularly profound session. "They had scary faces and loud voices. But you would have protected him, wouldn't you, Rex? You would have made them go away." Maria felt her heart break and soar simultaneously. Emma was processing her trauma through her relationship with Rex, using him as a safe confessor for the terrible things she had witnessed. The child psychologist had warned them that this phase was crucial. Emma was beginning to externalize her experience instead of keeping it locked inside. The most magical moment came during their 6th visit. Emma had been unusually quiet, even for her, sitting cross-legged in the grass and braiding dandelion stems while Rex dozed in the afternoon sun. Suddenly, she looked up at Maria with those profound blue eyes. "Detective Santos, Rex told me something important," she announced in a voice clearer than anyone had heard from her in weeks. Maria's pulse quickened. "What did he tell you, sweetheart?" "He said that good dogs protect people from bad men. And he said that when little girls see bad things happen, they should tell the good dogs about it, so the good dogs can help catch the bad men." Rosa gasped from the porch, her hand flying to her heart. This was the longest string of sentences Emma had spoken since the incident. More importantly, she was beginning to understand that her terrible secret might actually have a purpose. "Rex is very wise," Maria said carefully. "Do you think you might want to tell him about the bad men you saw?" Emma considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. She looked at Rex, who had opened his eyes and was watching her with his usual patient attention. "Not today," she finally decided, "but maybe soon. Rex says I have to get all the way brave first." That evening, after Maria and Rex had left, Emma surprised everyone by speaking during dinner. It wasn't about the incident, it was about normal 3-year-old things like wanting more mashed potatoes and asking if she could watch cartoons after her bath. But Rosa called Maria immediately. "She's talking again." Rosa wept into the phone. "Not about that terrible day, but about everything else. It's like Rex gave her permission to be a little girl again." Dr. Walsh explained the phenomenon when Maria consulted with her later. "Emma has compartmentalized her trauma. She's created a safe space where she can be herself while keeping the difficult memories separate. Rex has become the guardian of both spaces. He holds her trauma safely while allowing her personality to emerge. This is actually incredibly healthy progress." As Maria drove home that night, she glanced in her rearview mirror at Rex, who was sleeping peacefully in his travel harness. "You're working miracles, partner," she murmured. "That little girl is finding her voice because of you." Rex's ears twitched in his sleep, and Maria could have sworn she saw him smile. Tomorrow was only Wednesday, but Emma would already be counting the days until their next Tuesday visit, when she would share more secrets with her 4-legged therapist and take another step toward healing. The friendship between a traumatized child and a hero dog was blossoming into something that would change both their lives forever. But more importantly, it was building the foundation for justice, one whispered secret at a time. Detective Maria Santos stared at the murder board in the precinct's main conference room, her coffee growing cold as she studied the web of evidence, or lack thereof, spread across the white surface. 3 months had passed since Harold Thompson's murder, and the case was threatening to go cold despite her relentless efforts. Red string connected photos, witness statements, and forensic reports, but the connections led nowhere concrete enough to satisfy the district attorney's office. "Still no luck with the Martinez brothers?" Captain Rodriguez asked, settling into a chair beside Maria. The precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the case files that had consumed Maria's every waking moment. "Jake and Tommy Martinez are ghosts when they want to be," Maria replied, rubbing her tired eyes. "Their alibi for the day of Thompson's murder is airtight. 3 witnesses swear they were at a construction site in Tempe, but their stories are too perfect, too rehearsed. And the timing." She pointed to the timeline on the board. "The job site is 45 minutes from Maple Street. They could have killed Thompson, dumped the stolen goods, and been back at work before anyone noticed. They were gone." The Martinez brothers had been on Phoenix PD's radar for 2 years. Jake, 28, was the mastermind intelligent, methodical, with a juvenile record that escalated from petty theft to armed robbery. Tommy, his younger brother at 24, was the muscle less clever, but more violent with anger management, issues and a cocaine habit that made him unpredictable. They specialized in targeting elderly victims living alone, often watching their routines for weeks before striking. The forensics are useless, Maria continued, gesturing toward a stack of lab reports. The perpetrators wore gloves, and any footprints were contaminated by the first responders. We found fibers from common work clothing and 2 partial fingerprints. That belonged to Thompson's cleaning lady. The stolen items never turned up in any pawn shops or black market channels. They either kept everything or have connections we haven't identified yet. Captain Rodriguez studied the photos of the crime scene, his expression grim. What about the surveillance cameras? That's the most frustrating part, Maria said, pulling up footage on her laptop. Thompson's neighbor across the street has a security system, but the camera was mysteriously damaged 3 days before the murder. Someone threw a rock at it. The traffic camera at the intersection was down for maintenance that entire week. It's like they planned around our ability to track them. The case had consumed Maria in ways that worried her colleagues. She worked late into the night, cross-referencing similar crimes in neighboring states, building psychological profiles, chasing down leads that invariably led to dead ends. Her desk was covered with victim photos from other cases' elderly people who had been targeted by similar home invasion teams. The Martinez brothers' suspected crime spree stretched across 3 states in 7 years. But Thompson's murder was the first time they had actually killed someone. The community is scared, Captain, Maria said, her voice heavy with frustration. Mrs. Chun down the street from Thompson installed 5 deadbolts on her door. Mr. Peterson on Oak Avenue won't leave his house after dark. These bastards haven't just destroyed one family. They've terrorized an entire neighborhood. The breakthrough, or what Maria hoped might be a breakthrough, came during her regular Tuesday visit to Emma. The little girl had been making remarkable progress with Dr. Walsh, speaking normally about everyday things while carefully avoiding any mention of the day that had changed her life. But on this particular Tuesday, something shifted. Emma was sitting in her usual spot beside Rex, drawing with colored pencils, while the adults talked quietly on the porch. She had become obsessed with drawing lately, filling notebook after notebook with pictures that Rosa saved in a special box. Most of her artwork showed normal 3-year-old subjects, flowers, houses, stick figure families. But occasionally, darker images appeared, shadowy figures with no faces, broken windows, or a small girl hiding behind geometric shapes that might represent buildings or furniture. Detective Santos, Emma called out suddenly, looking up from her sketch pad. Can I show you something? Maria's heart rate picked up. Emma rarely addressed her directly, usually communicating through Rex or her grandmother. Of course, sweetheart. What would you like to show me? Emma held up her latest drawing. It was more detailed than her usual work, 2 tall stick figures, wearing what looked like dark hats or masks, standing beside a rectangular shape that could be a vehicle. Between the figures and a smaller stick figure hiding behind a brown square, she had drawn a large dog with pointed ears and a collar. This is from my bad dream, Emma said matter-of-factly. But Rex is in it too, protecting me from the scary men. Maria exchanged glances with Rosa, who looked both hopeful and terrified. Emma, can you tell me about the scary men in your dream? Emma pointed to the taller of the 2 stick figures. This one was really loud and mean. He pushed Mr. Thompson down. She moved her finger to the second figure. This one had something shiny in his hand, and he kept looking around like he was scared too. Something shiny? Maria asked gently, her detective instincts sharpening. Like this, Emma said, pulling a butter knife from the craft supplies scattered around her. But bigger and scarier. Maria felt her pulse quicken. Emma was describing a knife, but more importantly, she was describing two distinct perpetrators, with different roles exactly matching the Martinez brothers' known method of operation. Jake typically acted as the aggressor and talker, while Tommy served as the lookout and carried weapons. Emma, in your dream, what did the scary men look like? Emma considered this seriously, then pointed to Rex. Tell her, Rex, you saw them too. Maria knelt down beside the pair. What did Rex see, Emma? Rex says one of the scary men had marks on his arm, like pictures that don't wash off. Emma traced patterns on her own forearm. And the other one had yellow teeth like when Grandma forgets to put in her special teeth. Maria's breath caught. Jake Martinez had a distinctive tattoo sleeve on his right arm featuring eagles and skulls. Tommy had severe dental problems from years of methamphetamine use, resulting in yellowed and missing teeth that were clearly visible when he spoke. For the first time since the investigation began, Maria felt like they might actually have a case, but Emma's fragmented memories, filtered through dreams and trauma, wouldn't be enough to convince a jury. They needed more, much more, if they were going to put the Martinez brothers behind bars where they belonged. Emma, Maria said, carefully, do you think you might be ready to help Rex catch the bad men from your dream? Emma looked at Rex, who seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. His ears were alert, his brown eyes focused intently on the little girl who held the key to justice. Not yet, Emma whispered, but Rex says maybe soon. He says I'm getting braver every day. As Maria drove back to the precinct that afternoon, she felt the familiar mixture of hope and frustration that had become her constant companion. Emma was their only witness, their only hope for justice. But was a 3-year-old's traumatic memories enough to build a murder case that could withstand the scrutiny of defense attorneys and skeptical jurors? The Martinez brothers were still out there, probably planning their next victim. And somewhere, in Emma's healing mind, lay the evidence that could stop them forever. If only Maria could find a way to unlock it without destroying the brave little girl who held their secrets. The Phoenix District Attorney's office buzzed with tension as Rachel Chun paced behind her mahogany desk, her high heels clicking against the hardwood floor with military precision. At 42, she had built her career on impossible cases and controversial decisions, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Spread across her desk were psychological evaluations, legal precedents, and crime scene photos that told the story of Harold Thompson's brutal murder and the 3-year-old girl who might be their only hope for justice. You're asking me to put a toddler on the witness stand, Rachel said, her voice carrying the weight of disbelief. A child who's been selectively mute for 4 months and communicates primarily with a police dog. Do you understand how this will look to a jury? 2. The media? Detective Santos sat across from her, flanked by Dr. Jennifer Walsh and Child Advocate Services Director Margaret Foster. The room felt charged with the kind of electricity that precedes either breakthrough or catastrophe. Through the floor to ceiling windows, downtown Phoenix stretched endlessly under the desert sun, oblivious to the legal earthquake being contemplated in this 20th floor conference room. Rachel, I've been working with traumatized children for 15 years, Dr. Walsh interjected, her voice steady but passionate. Emma Rodriguez has made extraordinary progress. Her connection with Rex has unlocked memories she couldn't access to traditional therapy. But more importantly, she's expressed a desire to help Rex catch the bad men. This isn't about exploiting a child. It's about empowering her to reclaim her voice. Maria leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. We've exhausted every other avenue. The Martinez brothers are ghosts when they need to be, and their alibis are airtight. Emma's testimony isn't just our best shot, it's our only shot. And every day we wait, they're planning their next victim. Rachel studied the psychological evaluation in her hands. Dr. Walsh had documented Emma's progress with meticulous detail. Her transition from complete silence to whispered conversations with Rex, her increasingly detailed drawings that matched known details about the Martinez brothers, and most importantly, her growing understanding that her terrible experience might serve a greater purpose. "The defense will crucify us," Rachel said, though her tone suggested she was already considering the possibility. "They'll argue that a 3-year-old's testimony is unreliable, that we're traumatizing her further, that the presence of a police dog creates undue emotional manipulation of the jury." Margaret Foster, a woman whose 30 years in child advocacy had taught her when to fight and when to retreat, spoke up. "Ms. Chun, I've reviewed the case files and observed Emma personally. This child has agency in this decision. Through her relationship with Rex, she's communicated repeatedly that she wants to help. We're not forcing her into something traumatic. We're providing her with a platform to heal through justice." The breakthrough moment that had led to this meeting occurred just 5 days earlier, during what should have been a routine Tuesday visit. Emma had been playing with a dollhouse, arranging tiny furniture with the intense concentration only children possess, when she suddenly looked up at Rex and made an announcement that changed everything. "Rex, I know how to help you catch the bad men now," she had declared with startling clarity. "I can tell the judge what I saw, just like in the movies Mommy watches. But you have to come with me, so I'm not scared." Rosa had nearly dropped her coffee cup. Maria had felt her heart race as she knelt beside Emma. "Sweetheart, telling a judge is a very big thing. Are you sure you're ready?" Emma had considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "I'm not ready, she admitted. "But Rex says that good people help catch bad people, even when it's scary. And I'm a good people, right?" Dr. Walsh had worked with Emma extensively in the days following, using play therapy and mock courtroom scenarios to gauge the child's readiness and resilience. What she discovered was remarkable. Emma's trauma, while still present, had been transformed through her relationship with Rex from a paralyzing secret into a source of empowerment. "She's developed what we call survivor courage," Dr. Walsh explained to Rachel. "Her bond with Rex has given her a sense of safety and purpose. She genuinely believes that telling her story will protect other children from experiencing what she experienced. This isn't a child being pushed into something traumatic. This is a child who's found her voice and wants to use it for justice." Rachel walked to her window, looking out at the city she had sworn to protect. Somewhere out there, the Martinez brothers were planning their next crime, confident that they had committed the perfect murder. Meanwhile, a little girl was drawing pictures of police dogs and practicing her letters so she could write "thank you" notes to the officers who were trying to help her. "What precedent do we have for this?" Rachel asked, though she suspected. She already knew the answer. "Limited," admitted her legal assistant, David Park, consulting his tablet. California allowed a 4-year-old to testify in a domestic violence case in 2019, but with significant restrictions. Texas has permitted testimony from children as young as 3 in abuse cases, but always with expert psychological support, and usually via closed-circuit television. "The Martinez brothers' defense team will challenge everything," Rachel mused. "They'll demand psychological evaluations, competency hearings, and they'll try to exclude Rex from the courtroom entirely." Maria felt the case slipping away. "Rachel, if we don't try this, Harold Thompson's killer walks free. Emma will live her entire life knowing she could have helped but didn't get the chance. And the next elderly victim, and there will be one, their blood is on our hands." The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of Phoenix traffic 20 floors below. Rachel Chun had built her career on calculated risks, but this decision would define her legacy regardless of the outcome. Finally, she turned from the window. "Dr. Walsh, I need a comprehensive psychological evaluation determining Emma's competency to testify. Margaret, I need a child advocate present at every stage of this process. And Detective Santos, I need you to prepare Emma and Rex for the most scrutinized testimony in Arizona legal history. She paused, looking at each person in the room. But understand this. The moment I believe this process is harming Emma Rodriguez, we stop. Justice is important, but the child's well-being comes first. Are we clear? As the team nodded their agreement, Rachel felt the familiar mixture of terror and exhilaration that came with impossible cases. In 2 weeks, they would ask a 3-year-old girl and a police dog to do something unprecedented in Arizona legal history. The decision was made. Now they had to prepare for the most unconventional trial of their careers, knowing that failure meant more than just a lost case. It could destroy the brave little girl who had found her voice through her love for a 4-legged hero. The mock courtroom in the Phoenix District Attorney's office had been transformed into something that looked like a cross between a playground and a legal battleground. Child-sized furniture sat alongside the imposing judge's bench, colorful. Books were stacked next to law volumes, and Emma's stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppers, had taken up permanent residence on the witness stand. For 3 weeks, this room had become Emma Rodriguez's second home as she prepared for what legal experts were calling the most unprecedented testimony in Arizona history. Dr. Jennifer Walsh watched from the gallery as Emma practiced walking to the witness stand for the 100th time, Rex padding silently beside her. The little girl had grown more confident with each session, but Walsh knew that the sterile practice room bore no resemblance to the circus that awaited them in Judge Patricia Williams' actual courtroom. Remember, Emma, Assistant District Attorney, Sarah Martinez said gently, kneeling to the child's eye level. When the scary lawyers ask you questions, you just look at Rex and tell the truth. Rex will be right there with you the whole time. Emma nodded solemnly, her small hand resting on Rex's head. At 3 years old, she couldn't fully comprehend the magnitude of what lay ahead, but she understood the basic concept. Bad men had hurt Mr. Thompson, and she was going to help Rex catch them by telling what she saw. The preparation process had been unlike anything the legal team had ever attempted. Child psychologist Dr. Walsh worked with Emma daily, using play therapy techniques to help her process and articulate her memories. They used dolls to reenact the day of the murder, with Emma moving the figures around a miniature house while Rex lay beside her, providing comfort and stability. Show me what happened when the bad men came to Mr. Thompson's house, Dr. Walsh would say, and Emma would carefully position the dolls, narrating in her small, clear voice. The bad men pushed Mr. Thompson down. He fell and didn't get up. I was hiding behind the shed with Mr. Hoppers, and I was very scared. Detective Maria Santos had become Emma's primary liaison with the legal system, visiting twice weekly to help the child understand courtroom procedures. Maria would explain concepts in 3-year-old terms. The judge is like a teacher who makes sure everyone follows the rules. The jury are like grown-ups who listen to stories and decide if they're true. But it was Rex who made all the difference. The German Shepherd had been specially certified as a courthouse facility dog through additional training with the K-9 unit's behavioral specialist. He learned to remain perfectly still during questioning, to position himself where Emma could see and touch him, and to provide comfort without being distracting to the jury. Rex understands his job, Maria explained to the increasingly nervous legal team. He's not just Emma's emotional support, he's her translator. When she gets scared or confused, she looks at him and somehow finds the words she needs. The defense team for the Martinez brothers had been relentless in their pre-trial motions. Defense attorney Marcus Webb, a sharp-dressed man with a reputation for aggressive tactics, filed motion after motion challenging Emma's competency, the admissibility of her testimony, and especially the presence of Rex in the courtroom. You're honor, Webb argued during a heated pre-trial hearing. Allowing a police dog in the courtroom during testimony creates undue emotional manipulation of the jury. The prosecution is literally using man's best friend to tug at heartstrings rather than present factual evidence. This is theater, not justice. Judge Patricia Williams, a 20-year veteran of the bench known for her fairness and innovation, had spent weeks researching similar cases across the country. Mr. Webb, this court recognizes the unusual nature of these circumstances. However, Dr. Walsh's evaluation clearly indicates that the child witness is competent to testify, and that the therapy animal is essential to her ability to communicate effectively. The judge's decision to allow Rex in the courtroom had sent shockwaves through the legal community. Legal scholars debated the precedent on talk shows and in law journals. The Humane Society issued statements supporting the innovative approach. The Martinez family hired a second attorney specializing in appeals, confident they could overturn any conviction based on the prejudicial presence of a police dog. Meanwhile, Emma continued her preparation with the focused dedication of a cool, tiny professional. She learned to speak into the microphone, practiced pointing at photographs, and rehearsed the simple oath. I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. The breakthrough moment came during their final practice session. Emma had been struggling with identifying the defendants in a photo lineup, often becoming overwhelmed and shutting down when shown pictures of the Martinez brothers. Dr. Walsh had tried various approaches, having Emma draw the suspects, using dolls to represent them, even showing her photos gradually over multiple sessions. I can't look at their scary faces, Emma had whispered to Rex during one particularly difficult session. They make my tummy feel sick. It was Maria who found the solution. Emma, what if we cover up their faces and you just look at other parts? You told us one of the bad men had pictures on his arm, right? Emma brightened immediately. Like tattoos. Yes, I can look at the arm pictures. When shown a photograph of Jake Martinez's distinctive eagle and skull tattoo sleeve, Emma pointed immediately. That's the loud bad man's arm. He had those pictures. When shown Tommy's police booking photo highlighting his damaged teeth, she nodded confidently. And that's the other bad man's yellow teeth. Rex, do you remember them too? As if on cue, Rex gave a soft woof, his tail thumping against the floor. The legal team exchanged glances. This unusual partnership between child and dog was becoming more remarkable with each passing day. The final preparation session took place in the actual courtroom after hours. Emma walked through the imposing space, dwarfed by the mahogany benches and formal portraits of former judges. Rex stayed close to her side as she practiced taking the oath, answering questions, and most importantly, remaining calm under pressure. This is a really big room, Emma observed, looking up at the vaulted ceiling. Will there be lots of people watching me? Yes, sweetheart, Dr. Walsh replied honestly. But remember, Rex will be right there with you, and all these people want to help you tell your story. Emma considered this seriously, then looked down at Rex. We can do this, can't we, Rex? We can help catch the bad men together. Rex's tail wagged once, a gesture that had become their private signal of agreement and encouragement. As the team prepared to leave that evening, Emma made one final request that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Can we practice one more time? I want to make sure I get it right for Mr. Thompson. Tomorrow, the most unconventional trial in Arizona. History would begin. A 3-year-old girl and her 4-legged best friend were about to face the legal system, the media circus, and 2 accused murderers in pursuit of justice that had been 4 months in the making. The Maricopa County Superior Court had never seen anything like the circus that descended upon it on the morning of November 15th. News vans lined the street like metal vultures, their satellite dishes reaching toward the desert sky, while reporters jockeyed for position behind police barricades. Inside the courthouse, security had been tripled, and every seat in Judge Patricia Williams' courtroom was occupied by a mixture of legal professionals, journalists, child advocacy experts, and members of the public who had been following what the media dubbed the case of the silent witness. Emma Rodriguez sat in the witness preparation room, her legs swinging from a chair that was still too big for her, despite the booster seat. She wore her favorite dress, the purple one with tiny silver stars that her mother had bought especially for this day, and her dark curls had been carefully brushed and adorned with a matching purple headband. Mr. Hoppers sat in her lap, and beside her chair, Rex lay in his official position, his German Shepherd eyes alert and focused on his tiny partner. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Dr. Jennifer Walsh asked, kneeling beside Emma's chair. The child psychologist had barely slept. In 3 days, running through every possible scenario, every potential trigger that might cause Emma to shut down on the witness stand. Emma looked down at Rex, who seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. His ears were erect, his brown eyes locked on hers with the kind of steady confidence that had carried her through 4 months of healing. "Rex says we're ready," Emma announced, with the matter-of-fact tone that had become her trademark. "We're going to help catch the bad men today." Detective Maria Santos felt her heart hammering as she escorted Emma and Rex through the courthouse corridors. They had practiced this walk dozens of times in the empty building after hours, but now the halls buzzed with activity. Court officers nodded respectfully as they passed, and Maria noticed several seasoned bailiffs wipe away tears at the sight of the tiny girl walking so bravely beside her canine guardian. Judge Patricia Williams had cleared her courtroom of all but essential personnel for Emma's entrance, knowing that the overwhelming sight of hundreds of strangers might traumatize the child before she even reached the witness stand. The gallery would be allowed to fill only after Emma was settled and comfortable. As the courtroom doors opened, Emma's eyes widened at the imposing space that looked so much larger and more formal than their practice room. The defendant's table sat ominously. To her left, currently empty, but soon to be occupied by Jake and Tommy Martinez. The jury box stretched along the right wall, its 12 seats waiting to be filled by the citizens, who would decide whether her testimony was enough to convict 2 murderers. "It's okay, Emma," Assistant District Attorney Sarah Martinez whispered. "Remember, Rex is going to be right there with you the whole time." Emma nodded and began her walk to the witness stand, Rex padding silently beside her. Her small hand rested on his head as they approached the raised platform where she would tell her story. The court stenographer watched with tears in her eyes as the bailiff helped Emma climb into the witness chair, while Rex positioned himself exactly as they had practiced, close enough for Emma to touch, visible in her peripheral vision, but not blocking the jury's view. Judge Williams leaned forward, her voice gentler than anyone had ever heard it. "Hello, Emma. Do you know why you're here today?" "Yes," Emma replied, her voice clear in the microphone that had been adjusted to her height. "I'm here to help Rex catch the bad men who hurt Mr. Thompson." The prosecution had decided to bring the defendants in after Emma was sworn in, hoping to minimize her initial anxiety. As Jake and Tommy Martinez were led to their table in shackles, Emma's body tensed visibly. Jake Martinez, 28, looked exactly as she remembered, tall, muscular, with a distinctive tattoo sleeve covering his right arm. Tommy Martinez appeared nervous, his yellowed teeth visible as he whispered frantically to his attorney. Emma's breathing quickened, and for a terrifying moment, Dr. Walsh thought they might lose her to the selective mutism that had plagued her for months. Emma's eyes darted around the courtroom, taking in the sea of faces, the imposing formality, a very real presence of the men who had haunted her nightmares. Then she looked down at Rex. The German Shepherd gazed up at her with those intelligent brown eyes that seemed to say, "I'm here. You're safe." "We can do this together." His tail gave the slightest wag, their private signal of encouragement that no one else would notice. Sarah Martinez began her questioning gently. "Emma, can you tell us where you were on the day Mr. Thompson was hurt?" "I was playing in Grandma Rose's backyard," Emma replied, her voice gaining strength. "I was making a fairy house out of leaves." "And what did you see that day?" Emma's grip tightened on Mr. Hopper's, but her voice remained steady. "I saw two bad men go to Mr. Thompson's house. They were loud and scary, and they pushed him down." The questioning continued for 20 minutes, with Emma providing details that perfectly matched the crime scene evidence. She identified Jake Martinez's tattoo sleeve and Tommy's damaged teeth. She described their clothing, their vehicle, and the sequence of events with the clarity that only an uninvolved observer could provide. But then defense attorney Marcus Webb began his cross-examination, and everything changed. Webb approached the witness stand with the predatory confidence of a lawyer who specialized in destroying witnesses. "Emma, you were very far away from Mr. Thompson's house, weren't you? Maybe you didn't see things clearly." Emma looked confused by the aggressive tone. She glanced at Rex, who remained perfectly still, but somehow radiating protective energy. "Maybe you just imagined some of these things?" Webb pressed. 3-year-olds have very good imaginations, don't they? The courtroom grew deadly quiet. Emma's eyes filled with tears as the defense attorney's questions became more pointed, more challenging. Dr. Walsh started to rise from her seat, concerned that Emma was about to shut down completely. "Emma," Webb said with calculated cruelty, "are you sure you're telling the truth? Or are you just making up stories?" The little girl's face crumpled. The weight of the courtroom, the aggressive questioning, the presence of the men who had murdered her neighbor, it all crashed down on her 3-year-old shoulders. She buried her face in Mr. Hopper's and began to cry silently, her small body shaking. Judge Williams was about to call a recess when something extraordinary happened. Rex, without any command or encouragement, rose from his position and moved closer to Emma's chair. He placed his large head against her arm and looked directly into her tear-filled eyes. In that moment, something passed between the traumatized child and the therapy dog that transcended words. Emma wiped her eyes and looked out at the courtroom. Her gaze swept over the jury, the gallery filled with strangers, the defense attorneys, who had tried to break her spirit, and finally landed on Jake and Tommy Martinez. In a voice that carried the absolute certainty of truth, the absolute innocence of childhood, and the absolute courage of someone who had found her strength through love, Emma Rodriguez spoke 2 words that would echo through legal history. Bad men. The courtroom erupted in gasps, tears, and whispered prayers. Several jurors were openly weeping. The stenographer's fingers trembled as she recorded the moment. Even the hardened bailiffs felt their eyes burn with emotion. Those 2 simple words, delivered with such pure honesty by such a small witness, carried more weight than hours of expert testimony could have provided. They cut through the legal maneuvering, the defense strategies, and the complex evidence to reach the fundamental truth. Emma Rodriguez had witnessed evil, and she had found the courage to name it. Judge Williams called for a 15-minute recess. But the real verdict had already been delivered by the bravest witness any of them had ever seen. The Maricopa County Superior Court had never seen anything like the circus that descended upon it on the morning of November 15th. News vans lined the street like metal vultures, their satellite dishes reaching toward the desert sky, while reporters jockeyed for position behind police barricades. Inside the courthouse, security had been tripled, and every seat in Judge Patricia Williams' courtroom was occupied by a mixture of legal professionals, journalists, child advocacy experts, and members of the public who had been following what the media dubbed the case of the silent witness. Emma Rodriguez sat in the witness preparation room, her legs swinging from a chair that was still too big for her, despite the booster seat. She wore her favorite dress, the purple one with tiny silver stars that her mother had bought especially for this day, and her dark curls had been carefully brushed and adorned with a matching purple headband. Mr. Hoppers sat in her lap, and beside her chair, Rex lay in his official position, his German Shepherd eyes alert and focused on his tiny partner. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Dr. Jennifer Walsh asked, kneeling beside Emma's chair. The child psychologist had barely slept. In 3 days, running through every possible scenario, every potential trigger that might cause Emma to shut down on the witness stand. Emma looked down at Rex, who seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. His ears were erect, his brown eyes locked on hers with the kind of steady confidence that had carried her through 4 months of healing. "Rex says we're ready," Emma announced, with the matter-of-fact tone that had become her trademark. "We're going to help catch the bad men today." Detective Maria Santos felt her heart hammering as she escorted Emma and Rex through the courthouse corridors. They had practiced this walk dozens of times in the empty building after hours, but now the halls buzzed with activity. Court officers nodded respectfully as they passed, and Maria noticed several seasoned bailiffs wipe away tears at the sight of the tiny girl walking so bravely beside her canine guardian. Judge Patricia Williams had cleared her courtroom of all but essential personnel for Emma's entrance, knowing that the overwhelming sight of hundreds of strangers might traumatize the child before she even reached the witness stand. The gallery would be allowed to fill only after Emma was settled and comfortable. As the courtroom doors opened, Emma's eyes widened at the imposing space that looked so much larger and more formal than their practice room. The defendant's table sat ominously. To her left, currently empty, but soon to be occupied by Jake and Tommy Martinez. The jury box stretched along the right wall, its 12 seats waiting to be filled by the citizens, who would decide whether her testimony was enough to convict 2 murderers. "It's okay, Emma," Assistant District Attorney Sarah Martinez whispered. "Remember, Rex is going to be right there with you the whole time." Emma nodded and began her walk to the witness stand, Rex padding silently beside her. Her small hand rested on his head as they approached the raised platform where she would tell her story. The court stenographer watched with tears in her eyes as the bailiff helped Emma climb into the witness chair, while Rex positioned himself exactly as they had practiced, close enough for Emma to touch, visible in her peripheral vision, but not blocking the jury's view. Judge Williams leaned forward, her voice gentler than anyone had ever heard it. "Hello, Emma. Do you know why you're here today?" "Yes," Emma replied, her voice clear in the microphone that had been adjusted to her height. "I'm here to help Rex catch the bad men who hurt Mr. Thompson." The prosecution had decided to bring the defendants in after Emma was sworn in, hoping to minimize her initial anxiety. As Jake and Tommy Martinez were led to their table in shackles, Emma's body tensed visibly. Jake Martinez, 28, looked exactly as she remembered, tall, muscular, with a distinctive tattoo sleeve covering his right arm. Tommy Martinez appeared nervous, his yellowed teeth visible as he whispered frantically to his attorney. Emma's breathing quickened, and for a terrifying moment, Dr. Walsh thought they might lose her to the selective mutism that had plagued her for months. Emma's eyes darted around the courtroom, taking in the sea of faces, the imposing formality, a very real presence of the men who had haunted her nightmares. Then she looked down at Rex. The German Shepherd gazed up at her with those intelligent brown eyes that seemed to say, "I'm here. You're safe. We can do this together." His tail gave the slightest wag, their private signal of encouragement that no one else would notice. Sarah Martinez began her questioning gently. "Emma, can you tell us where you were on the day Mr. Thompson was hurt?" "I was playing in Grandma Rose's backyard," Emma replied, her voice gaining strength. "I was making a fairy house out of leaves." And what did you see that day? Emma's grip tightened on Mr. Hopper's, but her voice remained steady. I saw two bad men go to Mr. Thompson's house. They were loud and scary, and they pushed him down. The questioning continued for 20 minutes, with Emma providing details that perfectly matched the crime scene evidence. She identified Jake Martinez's tattoo sleeve and Tommy's damaged teeth. She described their clothing, their vehicle, and the sequence of events with the clarity that only an uninvolved observer could provide. But then defense attorney Marcus Webb began his cross-examination, and everything changed. Webb approached the witness stand with the predatory confidence of a lawyer who specialized in destroying witnesses. Emma, you were very far away from Mr. Thompson's house, weren't you? Maybe you didn't see things clearly. Emma looked confused by the aggressive tone. She glanced at Rex, who remained perfectly still, but somehow radiating protective energy. Maybe you just imagined some of these things? Webb pressed. 3-year-olds have very good imaginations, don't they? The courtroom grew deadly quiet. Emma's eyes filled with tears as the defense attorney's questions became more pointed, more challenging. Dr. Walsh started to rise from her seat, concerned that Emma was about to shut down completely. Emma, Webb said with calculated cruelty, are you sure you're telling the truth? Or are you just making up stories? The little girl's face crumpled. The weight of the courtroom, the aggressive questioning, the presence of the men who had murdered her neighbor, it all crashed down on her 3-year-old shoulders. She buried her face in Mr. Hopper's and began to cry silently, her small body shaking. Judge Williams was about to call a recess when something extraordinary happened. Rex, without any command or encouragement, rose from his position and moved closer to Emma's chair. He placed his large head against her arm and looked directly into her tear-filled eyes. In that moment, something passed between the traumatized child and the therapy dog that transcended words. Emma wiped her eyes and looked out at the courtroom. Her gaze swept over the jury, the gallery filled with strangers, the defense attorneys, who had tried to break her spirit, and finally landed on Jake and Tommy Martinez. In a voice that carried the absolute certainty of truth, the absolute innocence of childhood, and the absolute courage of someone who had found her strength through love, Emma Rodriguez spoke 2 words that would echo through legal history. Bad men. The courtroom erupted in gasps, tears, and whispered prayers. Several jurors were openly weeping. The stenographer's fingers trembled as she recorded the moment. Even the hardened bailiffs felt their eyes burn with emotion. Those 2 simple words, delivered with such pure honesty by such a small witness, carried more weight than hours of expert testimony could have provided. They cut through the legal maneuvering, the defense strategies, and the complex evidence to reach the fundamental truth. Emma Rodriguez had witnessed evil, and she had found the courage to name it. Judge Williams called for a 15-minute recess. But the real verdict had already been delivered by the bravest witness any of them had ever seen.